John Green. I was an engineer for Metro-North Railroad for 26 years, and this is my real story. Now, when I say I was an engineer, nowadays that means the person who operates a train. Back in the days of the steam engines, an engineer really had to know his equipment. He was responsible for greasing the wheels, making sure all lubrication points were taken care of, knowing your amount of water and coal you had in your antenna and whatnot, and you really you had to know the workings of your locomotive inside and out. Nowadays, the term engineer just applies to the person who operates the train. Trains these days are so modern and whatnot, but they're still not as easy as you think to run. It's not like you just get in and go. You have to know what direction you're going in, what track you're on, what the speed is, what the next station is. Are there any special instructions ahead? Are there any temporary speed restrictions ahead? Are there any conditions that might affect the overhead wire or the third rail? Or if you're running in diesel, are all your cars behind you, are they braking properly? Are the brakes releasing properly? You just have to know everything about your train. It's just much more than you think. It's not just sitting in a cab pushing a button. There's a lot more to it. Every day as an engineer, you have to report at a designated time at your designated operating terminal. I mainly worked out of the Stamford, Connecticut terminal as much as I could because it's only about 15 miles from my house in Larchmont. Although I did get to work out of the other terminals, I'm not sure, over my early years. When you don't have much seniority, you have to go where the work is. So I traveled to places like North White Plains, New York, Brewster, New York, Harmon, New York, New Haven, Connecticut, Bridgeport, Connecticut. But basically, like I said, because of the close proximity, I always preferred working out of Stamford. So every day, as I said, you show up at a predetermined time. You go into the office, you check in with the yardmaster to find out where your train is. Then you go into what's called the register room. The register room is where you sign in for the day. You check all pertinent instructions. They're called bulletin orders or general notices, things that affect track operations or off-track operations. You have to be up to date on them, you have to know them, and you have to have a conversation with your conductor so you both have a full understanding of any special instructions you have to comply with that day. Sometimes the bulletin orders covered a long period of time, but other times they might be just for a couple of hours a day or just for one day. That's why every day when you had to come in, you had to know what was ahead of you in terms of special instructions. You could never take that too lightly. Another one of the jobs I had on the railroad was working as a supervisor called a road foreman. He's the supervisor of all locomotive engineers, and that job entailed mainly just checking up on other engineers, see how they're performing their jobs. But part of the job was also getting familiar with other railroads' equipment that operated through Metro-North's territory, and one of them was the new Acela train sets. They first arrived on the property in late 1999, and they were running test trains on Metro-North's territory, and I got the chance to not only be on the engines, but a chance to run them quite often. Yeah, remember, they were still in their early stages. They were kind of stripped down and basic, but it was nice to run them. You could simply operate throttle and brake, and we got to go up to like 100, 110 miles an hour in them, which is very interesting, because the regular commuter cars generally don't go much above 75 miles an hour. So running the Acela in the early testing stage was one of the more memorable things I did. I guess of all the various equipment I operated for Metro-North, my favorite had to be the FL9s, mainly because they're ex-New Haven Railroad, and I grew up alongside the New Haven Railroad. As a kid, I used to go down there and watch them going by the station in Larchmont, New York. And one day I wondered, gee, wouldn't it be great if I could run one of those things? Well, as an engineer for Metro-North, I got plenty of opportunities to run them, and they were very interesting to run because they're very simple, very old-fashioned technology. And it was just something about running a locomotive built by EMD. They had great power, great acceleration, good braking, and just the thrill of running them was something I enjoyed very much. Another one of the things that came into my experience with railroad was when Metro-North inaugurated a new service to transport football fans from New Haven, Connecticut, down the New Haven line down to Penn Station, and they would later connect with a train to the football stadium at the Meadowlands complex. I was one of the first ones qualified, and it was quite interesting to operate their equipment. It operated a little differently than Metro-North's equipment did, but also I got to learn the territory between New Rochelle, New York, and Penn Station, what's known as the Hellgate line. It's only 19 miles long, but it was a different way of operating. They had a different type of signal system, and you had to learn the speeds and the rules. And operating in the Penn Station was interesting because it's so different from Grand Central. And to qualify there took quite a while. It was a lot to know, but it was one of the more enjoyable things I did. Another one of the jobs I got to do in my career with Metro-North was I was a train master at the Pelham, New York station, which is significant because that's where the New Haven Line trains switch over from operating on overhead wire to underrunning third rail. The trains would have to make the transition on the fly, as we say, while they were moving. Heading west towards New York, they would have to drop the overhead pantographs, and then when the train made contact with third rail, they had to throw a switch that would enable the train to take the power from the third rail instead of from the overhead wire. Now, most of them, 99 times out of 100, every train has no problem doing that. But there were occasions when a train would not make what we call a changeover. The train would have to stop. I would have to go down there with some mechanical people who I worked with. And we would have to secure the pantographs in the down position, make sure they're fully locked in place, and manually transition the cars over to third rail running so they can continue their trip to Grand Central. It happened a lot more during the cold weather, a lot with snow. Light powdery snow would get into the electrical cabinets and foul up the works sometimes. And climbing on the roof of a train with live overhead wire in ice and snow is a challenge. You always had to remember one thing: your safety always came first. The train can be late as long as we know the reason why. They would rather have the train be late than have people injured or killed, because you don't want to mess around with voltage. It's 12,000 volts at 60 cycles per second. Now, when the weather is bad, and you don't like driving your car, well, imagine how it feels driving a train. You have to get to your terminal, driving on bad roads, getting there on time, as I said before, and still be able to operate the trains. Now, railroad yards, they clear them out as much as possible, but you're walking through a lot of ice and snow to get out to your train. Now, that might be a quarter mile, that might be a half mile walk sometimes. And in snow, one step feels like 5. But you had to get there, you had to get on the equipment and make sure it was operating safely. And when you get the train going, you had to be aware of weather conditions that could cause your train to not accelerate properly or not brake properly. When there's snow on the ground, the snow can get drawn up between the wheels and the brake shoes, thus making it a much harder process to slow your train down. It takes more adhesion, more advanced braking notification to make your regular stops. Another problem is in the fall, when the leaves fall from the trees and land on the tracks, and when the trains run over them, they leave like an oily residue behind. And just imagine the millions of leaves that fall from trees every fall, and they're all getting crushed by the wheels, so the train that behind it is now going to be having a hard time adhering to the rail. It's what's called a slip slide. You have to operate your train with a great deal of restraint. There are certain rules that are in effect, how fast you can go, how fast you can approach stations, and what to do if the train does go into slip slide, where it's a continuous sliding motion, where the train wheels actually stop, but you're sliding on the rail because it's greasy. After a few months of picking up trash on the trains, I transferred to work in the mechanical department as a carman grade F in the Croton Harmon, New York shops, where basically I was involved in the repairing of the wheels, brakes, and traction motors of the multiple unit cars that Metro-North operates on their 3 divisions. I did that in Harmon until about January the following year. Then I transferred to Stamford, Connecticut, which is on Metro-North's New Haven line, where I got to work on the M2 cars at the time, and later M4 and M6. They're self-propelled multi-unit cars, and I learned a lot about them, and I was still in charge of doing brake tests and cab signal tests and changing out brake shoes and regular maintenance. My opportunity expanded a lot because I was good with the equipment. I was used to respond to a lot of the disabled train calls. Whenever a train broke down, obviously we had to go out and fix it and get it going again. I was usually called more than anyone else in the yard was, and it was a great education. After doing that for 3.5 years, I applied and was finally accepted into the engineer training program. The program lasted about 9 months, wherein I learned how to operate all Metro-North's equipment, to operate on all their various divisions and sublines, getting to know the stations, the speeds, the equipment, the passenger stations, just everything you need to know about running a train on all their divisions. And that to me was the greatest job I ever had.